and it's been uploaded. So that section from Robert Bork's The Antitrust Paradox that I mentioned in the lecture yesterday is now on Blackboard. Excuse me. Today we're going to be dealing with rebates and tying, or at least starting rebates and tying. I'm not sure how fast we'll get through them, but it's neither here nor there. Now, the starting point with respect to both rebates and tying is how they can be used as a form of to exclude other undertakings from the market. So the starting point's exclusion and exclusive purchasing. Exclusive purchasing is the phenomenon where an undertaking seeks to have its customers buy only its goods or its products. And of course, if an exclusive purchasing strategy is successful, that in itself eliminates competition in the market by excluding other competitors from the market. Now, the key thing in EU competition law, and this is in the guidelines for enforcement priorities of Article 82, 102, the Commission recognizes that as long as competitors can compete on equal terms for each individual customer's entire demand, there's generally no competition problems in the market. Okay? But if there is something in the obligation, the obligation imposed by the vendor that hinders this process, this ability of its customers to compete for all of the demand, then you have a problem. So the antecedent, the if clause, if competitors can compete on equal terms for each individual customer's demand, that's where the problems arise. Now, suppose this isn't the case, and in a lot of markets, it isn't the case. There are certain products called must-stock items, or alternatively, the undertaking is such that it's an undertaking that you must deal with, one way or another, a necessary trading partner. What would a must-stock item be? Well, for instance, in the Intel case, Intel processing chips, right? You know that blue sticker that says Intel inside? A certain amount of purchasers of computer equipment want to see that on the box or on the case of the computer. Okay? An unavoidable trading partner may also be somebody like Facebook. Okay, most of you will have Facebook accounts. Advertising on Facebook. A significant amount of the undertaking's advertising budget is spent on Facebook. So it becomes an unavoidable trading partner. Okay, you go to a store and you want crisps. Walker's seems to be the unavoidable trading partner. Okay, very few stores don't sell Walkers. Okay, the only example I can think about is Marks and Spencer's, which typically sells their own brands of foods. Okay, so it's these unavoidable trading partners or these must-stock items that can cause a problem. Okay, now the Commission recognizes competitors may not be able to compete for an individual customer's entire demand because the dominant undertaking is an unavoidable trading partner, at least for part of the demand, okay, that you have to deal with to some extent or another, that unavoidable trading partner. If you're Tesco, you have to deal with Walkers. Okay? If you're an advertiser, you have to deal with Facebook. Okay? If you're a computer manufacturer, a Dell, for instance, you have to deal with Intel. Okay? It's preferred by many final customers or because capacity constraints of the other suppliers. The other suppliers cannot produce enough to make up for that. So, an undertaking that's an unavoidable trading partner or that manufactures a must-stock item, in both cases they're unavoidable trading partners, okay, can foreclose the market by making access to its must-stock item or to that which you have to trade to get, by requiring customers that want or need that must-stock item, okay, to enter into an exclusive purchasing agreement. So for instance, in theory, the Walkers of the world, and I say in theory, so in the absence of competition rules that prevent this, the companies, the undertakings like the Walkers of the world could say, if you want to stock our crisps, you have to stock only our crisps, no competing products. Okay? And thereby foreclose the retail crisp market to non-Walkers crisp manufacturers. That's assuming, of course, Walkers is dominant and or a must-stock item. Okay? Now, you can do this, okay, one way of doing this is directly. Buy our crisps and only our crisps, or buy our whatevers, and our Intel chips, or as I will use in a moment, our Levi's jeans used to be a must-stock item. Okay, buy our product and nobody else's product, okay? So you can do it blatantly. The problem with doing it blatantly is that it's so anti-competitive. Okay, that sort of agreement or that sort of contractual term that's imposed upon a retailer is blatantly anti-competitive and would not withstand, how should we say, judicial or scrutiny by the competition authorities. There are more subtle ways of achieving the same goal. Okay? And I will show this to you. Let's take these. Let's deal with two concepts. You have the captive, a firm's needs. Let's say you're, I don't know, a seller, a retailer of jeans. So some of the is a captive amount. You must stock Levi's. Or a manufacturer of computers. The must stock item is Intel chips. You're a retailer selling savory snacks. So the must stock item is Walker's crisps. And then there's the contestable amount. That is to say, the other similar products that aren't made by the dominant entity. So in blue jeans, it would be other brands. In chips, in computer chips, it would be AMD. Okay. In crisps, it would be other brands of crisps. I don't know, Kettle Crisps or something, right? Okay. So you have two amounts. You have the captive amount, the must-stock items, and the contestable amount. Okay. Basically, the captive amount is the amount that's got to go to that dominant undertaking, to the unavoidable trading partner. Okay. The contestable amount can go anywhere. That's for the remainder of the market to compete over. Yes.
Yes. Can I understand that the two of these is interchangeable?
These are fairly interchangeable, or to a certain extent. Okay. They're interchangeable, they serve the same purpose, but not necessarily interchangeable in the ultimate consumer's eyes, right? The ultimate consumer wants to see, okay, so both AMD chips and Intel chips perform the same function, right? But a certain amount, in fact, a significant amount of the purchasers of computers want to see that Intel inside. Okay, so to that extent, they're not interchangeable. Okay, a certain amount of consumers want to consume Walker's crisps and don't want to consume other brands of crisps, even though there is interchangeable. So they're interchangeable to a point, and that to a point is very significant because that's what drives the must-stock nature.
So it's derived from the loyalty of consumers.
Exactly, it's derived from consumer preferences, or derived from, in certain cases, derived from certain advantages that the undertaking, the dominant undertaking has. Okay. In one case, the Post-Denmark case, which we briefly talked about yesterday. Okay, Post-Denmark. Okay, this was a case that involved distribution of bulk mail. In other words, junk mail. Okay. Now, Post-Denmark, okay, was the former Danish state postal monopoly, the Danish equivalent of the Royal Mail. Okay. So while it was a state monopoly, it was allowed, if not encouraged, to develop a significant delivery network. Okay. So it could deliver to Denmark, to any address in Denmark, basically overnight. Denmark's it's not a large country. It doesn't compare to Canada or Russia, but there's a lot of mailboxes and there's a lot of islands, making it very difficult to get to. Okay, some parts very difficult to get to. Now, if you had a bulk mailing and you needed to get that mailing to every address in Denmark, Post-Denmark could offer you its services. There were a lot of other bulk mail carriers that could deliver to other areas of Denmark, you know, the major cities, the Copenhagens of the world, right? Okay, but didn't have the extensive network to deliver to every address on every island in Denmark. Okay, so if you're so they could offer perhaps cheaper services to hit every address in the major cities, but if you wanted to cover every address in Denmark, you would have to deal with, as an unavoidable trading partner, Post-Denmark, to cover those, what we could call the rural addresses, the remote addresses. Okay? So, you know, it's not, so it's a different sort of preference, you know, from crisps, preference of crisps, or preferences of computer chips. But it was the unavoidable nature of having to deal with Post-Denmark if you wanted coverage of the country. Okay, but we'll get to Post-Denmark later. Now, with these two concepts in mind, you can design a rebate structure, okay, to make it too costly for firms to compete for the contestable amount. Okay, so you can design a rebate so that the dominant undertaking will rebate purchase prices of the must-stock items contingent upon you buying must-stock stock rather than stock from your competitors. Okay, and here's an example. Suppose you have a good that has an average avoidable cost. That's the cost to make it. Okay? So an AAC of 70 euros. Okay? Now the customer's demand is 120. okay? Of which 100 is from the must stock item. And 20 is contestable. Okay? So, the 100 is the must stock, that is to say, that has to be bought, that has to be purchased from the dominant undertaking. What the hell is that? The remaining 20 other undertakings can compete for it. Okay? Now, the dominant supplier says, I will charge you 100 euros per unit from 0 to 100 units. Okay? But if you buy more than 100 units, you get €10 rebate on all units bought. On all units bought, past and future. Okay. So how much is the first 100 units? What's the price of each unit for the first 100 units? I've given you that answer, 100 euros, right? What's the price for the 101st unit? 90? No. Think again. You get the rebate on all past and future units.
So it's still 100.
So pardon?
It's still 100.
No. Okay. So now figure it out. How are you going to figure it out? Okay. So the 101st unit okay, you pay 100 for, right? Then we'll add the rebate onto it. Okay, 10 euros per unit for all. For all, not just future, past and future. You're paying negative. You're getting paid to take that 101st unit. You see that? No.
They still get a rebate. So
Okay, you get a rebate, but you get a rebate on all of them, including the ones that you've already bought and paid for.
Well, that must make everything 90. Because you had 10,000.
So,
That's right, but you get your money back.
so in this case, I could get 1,000, but no.
You get 1,010. You get 1,010 euros back when you take delivery of the 101st unit.
Yeah, the one of us will
You get paid for it. Paid for a lot. Okay? You see that?
So the key point is the 20 units. It's not.
So it's 20 units, okay. Now, if you average the cost over the next 20 units, Each of those units is going to cost you 40 euros. Okay? Taking the rebates and how the rebates sum up. Each of those is going to cost you 40 euros. Okay? Now, if it has an average avoidable cost of 70 euros, no firm, no competing firm can sell them for 40 euros. Right? You see that?
Yeah.
It costs you 70 euros to make. Okay? The dominant undertaking for your first 100 charges you 100 euros. Okay? After the 100 euros, it gives you a huge rebate.
So they effectively get the next 10 free.
Yeah, exactly. And then you pay a very small amount for the subsequent 10. Okay? But now, the way the dominant undertaking, the unavoidable trading partner, is still getting 90 euros a unit. Right? It just gets more up front than it gets at the back.
But if I am a customer, say, if I want to get a bait, I also can just buy 101.
You can do that, 101, 102, yep. You could do that. So that's why, this is a simple example of it. You can change the rebate scheme to force it. Okay? You can do this and still, and what you can do is set your rebates so it kicks in gradually. But what you're doing is you can make it more difficult.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how the dominant supplier to occupy all these 20 units by the loyalty rebates? I just buy one of the two.
Yeah, you buy one, right? But your customers may want, you buy one, sure, you could do that. But what you could do is you can offer that rebate. I will give you a £10 rebate on all units bought if you buy more than if you buy 120. Okay, you can just fix it that way. Okay, if you know exactly your customer's demand and what their customers' demands are, you can customize the rebates. Okay? So that to prevent you from buying just the one. I can say, fine, instead of buying from 0 to 100 units, instead of doing 10% 10 euro rebate on all units, I could say I'll give you a 10 euro rebate on all units if you buy 120 units. Okay, just customize it. I mean, this works really well because it illustrates the point that you can get a negative situation where it's absolutely impossible, okay, for competing undertakings to compete for the market. I can change the number slightly and make it just difficult for the other undertakings. Okay?
I don't understand how this is any more anti-competitive than the example we used yesterday of sort of how like Walmart entering the market, charging really low prices and becoming the dominant entity and then increasing prices.
Okay.
Because this is just due to their own capacity, they're capable of doing.
Well, okay. The key thing there is it's not an abuse. Okay. When you enter the market, are you dominant? You're not dominant. Okay, so you can do what you want. Okay. Are you dominant if you're an unavoidable trading partner?
Yes.
Okay. So in your first example, a company that's, an undertaking that's entering into the market can do what it wants. It cannot, by definition, commit an abuse. Okay? If you're an unavoidable trading partner, you're dominant in a market, right? And we know that if you're dominant in a market, if there's a dominant undertaking in the market, okay, competition in that market is weakened.
Is that why they have the responsibility?
That's right.
Of course.
And by engaging in this kind of pricing behavior, you're further weakening competition. And you're also acting in the market or succeeding in the market using methods that aren't available to other undertakings, right? And thereby strengthening your own position. So that's the difference in the two cases. Okay, first of all, you're entering into the market, pricing low, and trying to get market share that way is conduct done by an undertaking that's necessarily non-dominant. You're entering into the market. So you are not dominant. You cannot be dominant if you're just entering into the market. Okay? But once you are dominant, you have an obligation not to use your strength to further hinder competition within that market. Okay.
So if you are a dominant supplier, so everything you've done, if you hinder this competition, is liable.
Okay, not everything you do. And this is where we get yet another gray boundary. Okay? You can obviously advance your own commercial interest, but you can't do so in a means that would be different from the sort of means that you would use in a competitive market. Okay? So you can take the information, you can take the position of other undertakings into account, but you can't use your vast market power. Okay? So what we have is the effective price, more 40%, cost of this precludes a competitor from competing the dominant undertaking can afford to because they've sold it 120 units at 90. Okay, this is the Intel case. Okay, this is part of the Intel case. Okay, and Intel, okay, this is Intel was first the commission decision. The commission's decision was then appealed, and this to the court of first instance. This is from what the court of first instance says because it's the T number. Okay. And then that went to the Court of Justice. The Court of Justice agreed with the Court of First Instance on most things, but said that the Court of First Instance didn't do a sufficiently complete job, so it remanded the matter back to the Court of First Instance. Okay? And it points out, the Court of First Instance points out the problems with these sort of exclusivity rebates, and said, these rebates granted by a dominant undertaking, okay, are by their very nature capable of foreclosing competitors, as you've seen from that example. Okay, financial advantage gained for the purpose of inducing a customer to obtain all of it, and that, so on and so forth. So, okay, and they pointed out that a foreclosure effect occurs not just when it shuts the market off to competitors, but when it makes competitors' lives more difficult. You don't have to close the door. You just have to make the door harder to open. Okay. And the court says, okay, the undertaking, which is a dominant position, is an obligation, okay, is an abuse, okay? If it ties purchasers, even if it does so at their request, by an obligation or promise their part to obtain most of their requirements exclusively from the undertaking. Now, the case law is further clarified. Okay. 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 System of loyalty rebates, discounts conditional from the undertaking. And further clarifies it where, okay, by stating that, look, if an unavoidable trading partner like Intel suggests and provides evidence that their practice was not capable of foreclosing competition, okay, so this reduces to the facts of Intel, okay, not our example, but the facts of Intel, okay, that this suggestion must be carefully considered by the court, and before the court, the commission. So the commission, so if Intel says, look, this doesn't foreclose competition, here's why. Okay? The commission, and hence the court, must examine Intel's counter-argument. Okay? And this was what the commission and the court failed, the court failed to do. Okay? Furthermore, the loyalty-inducing aspect of the rebate may also have benefits to the consumers. Okay? Intel suggested this and presented an argument in this line. So the commission and CFI is under an obligation to assess whether these rebates have a beneficial, how should we say, a beneficial quality, sort of a beneficial, give a benefit to the consumers. Okay, this is important because in a significant amount of Article 102 cases, a commercial justification is a defense. Okay, discounting and rebates, it's a defense. Okay. Refusal to supply, it can be a defense. Okay. Essential facilities, which is a form of refusal to supply, it's a defense. Okay. About the only circumstances where it's not a defense is predatory pricing, which is a strict price test below ABC, right, from yesterday. And possibly margin squeeze. It's not a defense. But in most other 102 cases, commercial necessity or commercial justification acts as a defense. Okay. So what you have is you have something like an objects and effects-based analysis. Okay. There are a few 102 violations that are in effect close to what 101 would regard as an object-based infringement, predatory pricing, margin squeeze. The rest have something like an effects-based analysis where it's a balancing test. Okay. What's the effects-based test in 101? Do you remember? Exactly, the counterfactual. Exactly. Okay? But here it's balancing the pro and anti-competitive effects. counterbalanced or outweighed, so it's a balancing test. Okay. And then, so, the court, first, this is the general court, didn't address Intel's arguments, so the case was remanded back. The other aspect, the other type of rebate that can be problematic is target rebates. We've seen target rebates in a couple of cases before. Okay. What a target rebate is that it's similar to this sort of, similar to the example. But typically you have in target rebates, you have levels or thresholds. So if you sell X plus Y, X plus Y plus Z, you get a certain amount, you get a certain amount back. Say commissions, okay? So you get a 5% commission until you reach threshold X, and then it goes up to 7.5, and then here it goes up to, let's say, 10, and then here it goes up to 12%, right? So the more you sell, okay, once you receive a threshold, once you get it to a threshold, then once you cross the threshold, you get more of a commission, okay? Now in our example, the it was cumulative. You can make these don't have to be cumulative. You can pay the commission on the next step. So you get 5% up to X, and then 7% between X and Y, you know, X plus Y, and then 10% there, and then 12% from there over, okay? But now, where did we see these before? Okay, do you remember? Probably didn't remember. British Airways has it. If you read the case, you'd have seen that. Where else? Saw one in 101. Insurance, body shops.
Oh, was that where they got sort of discounts on their insurance premiums when they sold more?
Yeah, they get a higher rate for their body, for their shop labor, the more insurance premiums they sold. Remember that case? Which case was that? Ooh. Alliance Hungarian. Okay. It's also in Michelin. Michelin's a good one for selling tires. Okay, now the Michelin selling tires. Tomra is another case. Okay. Involving reverse vending machines. Okay, now, what's the problem with this sort of rebate? The problem with this sort of rebate, I'll get another color pen because I can. The problem with this sort of rebate is there, and there, right? When you're close to the margin, it has a tendency to foreclose your competitors, right? Because suppose you're a travel agent in British Airways, probably not a good example these days because nobody's flying, but okay, you're an insurance company and a body shop, you're pretty close to your margin, you just need to make a few more sales to go to the next level, so you push Alliance Hungaria's insurance policies as opposed to a competitor of Alliance Hungaria. Okay, so it forecloses just below the margins of those thresholds. Okay? And this is what was happening in British Airways, Alliance Hungaria, Tomra, and the like. Okay. The Post-Denmark case is very interesting, and we'll end with Post-Denmark. Okay? Yeah. Okay. Post Denmark. The facts, as I told you, former state-owned monopoly, right? The Danish version of the Royal Mail. Okay. It was an unavoidable trading partner, and it operated a retroactive rebate scheme. That is to say, a scheme like in the example that if you spend a certain amount, it rebates on everything, like in my example, right? Okay? Now, so suppose you wanted to ship goods or ship junk mail to the islands. There was an unavoidable trading partner. So that would have a tendency, because of the retroactive rebates, for you to favor Post Denmark when you wanted to ship junk mail to Copenhagen, even though there were a number of smaller mail delivery services that could deal with Copenhagen, right? And even though perhaps the delivery services dealing with Copenhagen may have been cheaper than Post Denmark for Copenhagen deliveries, because of the retroactive rebates, it would make it cheaper for countrywide. Okay. So, first of all, they looked at the market structure. The court looked at the market structure in Post Denmark. Okay. Bulk mail market, Post Denmark held about 95% of the market. That is dominant, that's super dominant, okay? And it had a statutory monopoly still in the door-to-door delivery of letters, weighing up to 50%, okay? And it had a huge geographic coverage. Okay. So the court notes and points out that an undertaking with that kind of market share is an unavoidable trading partner. Okay? It is therefore very difficult for its competitors to outbid Post Denmark, because it can put into place a multitude of discounts. Okay? Now, a rebate scheme of the sort that Post Denmark was operating, okay, which, even though it doesn't contractually tie customers to using Post Denmark services exclusively, makes it more difficult, okay, for excuse me, for customers to use the services of other competing bulk mail distribution firms. Okay? And because it makes it more difficult, remember, it has an exclusionary effect. You don't have to actually exclude from the market, you just have to make it more difficult to compete in the market. Okay? And then Post Denmark, the court reiterates, okay, it's open to Post Denmark to justify its behavior for a commercial reason, and argue that its behavior, even though it has some exclusionary effects, is nevertheless counterbalanced by the efficiencies that it provides to consumers. Okay, now, up to this point, okay, the key test has been to look at how the practice affects the competitive opportunities of an as efficient competitor. Okay, the AEC test. Remember that? Okay, because we're not really, at least to a certain point, we don't really care about inefficient competitors. Okay? court points out a number of things. It identifies the test. It notes that it's the commission's test, but the commission's guidance papers don't bind the court. It nevertheless says on the whole, it's a good test. Points out that a finding of a negative rebate, like what we saw in my example, okay, negative prices, is not a prerequisite for a finding of abuse. Okay. And it also points out that even though the commission likes the test, and that the average efficient competitor test is a very good way of checking how competitive a market is and checking the consequences of a dominant undertaking's practice in the market. Okay? That it is not, there's no legal obligation to use that test exclusively. Okay? So the court says, okay, even though we're not going to exclude it, okay, it's not always necessary to use it. Okay. Particularly in the case where the market, or the main operator in the market, is a huge undertaking with a significant market share. Okay? Particularly when that market share was given to it as the result of it being a former state monopoly. Okay? Because post-Denmark, when privatization or liberalization of the postal services occurred, post-Denmark was given the share merely as a result, okay, of its previous state monopoly, previous incarnation as a state monopoly. Now, given this, given that you have a highly dominant entity on the market conditions themselves are not favorable to the development, or to allow for the development of smaller entities growing into undertakings that are as efficient as post-Denmark. Okay? So that's important. Okay? Because the competitive pressures, the various barriers. So therefore, the court says, the as efficient competitor test in some cases might be regarded as one tool among many to assess whether there is a dominant position or an abuse of a dominant position in a rebates context. This is important. So look, when dealing with these super dominant entities, okay, that are former state monopolies, the court recognizes that the AEC test is not necessarily the appropriate way of measuring competition in the market or exclusion in the market. Okay? But beyond these highly dominant entities, it's unlikely that this exclusion applies anywhere else. Okay? So we'll end here, and then on Monday we'll start with tying, and hopefully, and certainly finish off 102 next week. We may even get into mergers. Okay?
我会打算可能准备一些，你买越多，我越给你提这么相当于稍微你买多的东西，这个价格对啊，你看，这个
成本其实这个是卖那个的价格
今天吗？你有过想来的今天也可以，因为我想把奶用掉。因为他前面他是买了多少后面再到底多少个，然后他把前面的加上来，他整体算挺好，因为他减的是前面买了
为什么要后面减钱呢？
就是他为了算我为了我做出来这20，就尽可能看有多划算，因为前面是约的嘛，他的竞争对手是不会给折扣的，然后就是100乘以100，或者都是100乘以100，然后他这儿给他返利，他就把他前面的返利给了他，他这个是他钱就是超出就是那个就是反正不可竞争的那个部分的那个返利，他就是把它减去了，他这儿又省了1000元。
哦，他这个
他这个是正向的花了多少？就这个他是，就他我不知道为什么这么算这弄得很绕，就这儿是他那个就多出来的20花的钱嘛，然后这是花了的钱，然后这儿他再给他返1000回来，就是把他前面的给他返1000回来，然后再乘以现在是20，就是20个每跟他对，然后他的对手就比过他的，他对手成本好像是70。
对，就是说，因为你要返1000嘛，因为就是说。假设我最后我这个顾客 A 从这个人买了120个，那么我这个20个肯定是每个都只有90块钱，对不对？我还要减前面100个，每个都给他10块钱，那就是我前面省下来才是1000块钱。我20个减去这个，然后再除以20，就等于我这20个每一个省的钱省了40欧了，省了40欧了。是啊，省了40欧，因为你要算你总共省了多少钱了，对，你总共省了40欧嘛，然后你拿这个价格和别人去竞争的话，别人是成本都是70了，你肯定不可能卖到40欧这么便宜，所以说顾客都会选择120个都在他这买。怎么办？要不你要省点吗？